On there yet. There we are.
There we are. And no beatboxed intro. Come on, that was the chance
I'll
to
take
get
care
the
of it. You
beatbox
talk.
intro.
Introduce the show, Zane.
All right. Welcome to the MMA Vivisection UFC Sao Paulo edition. Vitor Belfort, Dan Henderson, or Victor Gracie Decision Dan 3. We are here to break down the card, top to bottom, bottom to top, with all your fight odds, analysis, all the information you need to know. I'm joined by my esteemed co-hosts, Connor Rubish, Dallas Winston. Men, thank you for joining me. Connor,
Man,
how you doing?
I'm
Men, it's
doing
my
well.
pleasure.
I'm doing well. I'm really looking
Men.
forward to this card. This card is stupendous from top to bottom. There are two fights I don't care about at all, and most cards have a lot more than that. And pretty much every other fight is either like an interesting crossroads fight, or a prospect versus a veteran, or a couple of prospects fighting, or a fight that has like a very clear kind of battle of styles in it, where it's like, is it going to be the puncher, or is it going to be the submission grappler? Is it going to be the brawler or the technician? Like every one of these fights has an interesting narrative. This is like the the top notch fight night card.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Especially with it has that great fight night main event of a fight that's like
Yeah.
I'm still interested in, but is absolutely meaningless in the broader context.
Mm.
Dallas, what are your thoughts?
It's good.
Thank you. That's why he's here, folks.
This guy.
Pay me. I'm paying. No, it's really
Pithy,
good. I
concise.
never really care. Like Nate always gets when we used to do vivisections wrapped up in how relevant is the fight. And I mean, yeah, sure, I can see that's one important aspect of fighting in general. But this is a perfect example of a card that kind of lacks big names, and the big names it has are kind of has-beens. No offense intended, but really good scraps all the way through. Really solid fighters.
Yeah, it's got the kind of fun that like I'm there are a lot of fights on this card that I'm not comfortable picking, which
Mm.
that's always what I want is like fights where I'm looking and I'm like, I have no idea. I can see who should win maybe, but as long as both guys have a good chance, or if they don't, somebody's really gonna show off and do something fun, I'm always happy.
Yeah.
On that note, let's get to one of the least interesting fights on the card right out of the gate. We have Bruno Correia, Mateus Nicolaou Pereira. Connor, start me off. Tell me what you're thinking in as little time as possible.
There's not a lot to say about this fight. Bruno Correa is very, very raw and unpolished. I remember counting in his tough Brazil fight with Reginaldo Vieira, he threw like 7 spinning kicks and not a single jab, and that basically tells you everything you need to know about where his striking game is. Mateus Nicolaou, former amateur boxer, actually a pretty solid fighter, kind of similar to Jimmy Rivera, who we'll see in the next fight. So I have to pick Nicolaou. I think both these guys have potential, but Nicolaou is far closer to a finished product than the very young Bruno Rodriguez.
Dallas.
I'm fairly intrigued by this fight, and really it's because of Nicolaou, and he is a really solid boxer. Very
Hmm.
very technical, sweet body shots. I think he's got a lot of potential. Like Connor said, when Correa's got this weird thing, I think that he just throws goofy ass kicks from range and then waits for people to rush in and try to take him down. That seems to have been his strategy in most of the fights. It might have been he's only 4-0, right? So many of the fights of his that I've seen. But he's 4-0, so really really unpolished. I think you gotta look at it as this is a dude with 4 professional fights in the UFC. So hopefully someone saw something in him, I suppose. But actually, I think Nicolaou, I'm excited to see how he does. He's a very entertaining fighter to watch, especially if you appreciate the technical side of things.
Oh, and I actually missed that this is going to be a flyweight bout. I
Yeah.
That flew right by me, so I'm actually really happy about that because they didn't compete at flyweight on Tough Brazil, but that's a division that does need more fresh blood injected at the bottom of it to kind of keep buoying the division upwards. So,
Buoying
yeah.
it.
Oh, what I've seen of Korea, he looks a little wild. Damn, I'm getting some feedback out of somebody. But
Sometimes I just repeat interesting words that you say. I'm
That
sorry.
that's what you're just mumbling generally
Yeah,
under your breath.
that
Dallas
feedback.
Dallas is like the guy in the background in Run DMC songs.
Or-
Fighter,
yeah,
Callum. He just like says every fifth word for emphasis.
Adidas.
All right, so yeah, Correia, he seems really wild and aggressive. I remember from when I was looking at him pre-tough, like he's got some of the athletic ability. He's tough, but he's just gonna like throw his whole body at people. So I'm hoping to see Pereira shine through and show off a little more technical game. Loser of this fight probably gets cut. That's the way that UFC usually goes with tough fighters. So
Although if
that's
they're both flyweights, maybe not.
maybe not. It would be nice if they kept them both because they're flyweights and that division needs more fighters. Sometimes they don't cut them, sometimes they do. I just would generally bet on the loser not being around. As for odds, Correia is the underdog, plus 158 down to plus 135. Nicolaou is the favorite, minus 172 up to minus 180. So not a major spread, pretty understandable, especially with guys coming off tough that aren't well known. But should be interesting to see if either of them can make a long-term impact at flyweight. Next up on the card, Jimmy Rivera, Pedro Munhoz. This to me smacks of being like a top 15 bantamweight bout early in the card. Like, I think both these guys should be in the top 15 right now, even. Dallas, what are your thoughts?
I think Munoz is on his way there. His only loss is to Rafael Asunciao, correct?
Yep.
And he's a Black House cat, and he's always fought like a guy who was who was kind of the real deal. So even when I had first heard of him, and I heard that and that he trained at Black House, so then that kind of catches your attention. And
And with Rafael Cordero.
yeah, I saw that. And to me, Rafael Cordero, I mean, really cannot go wrong training under that cat. Proven success, and not just, I mean, it's like results oriented kickboxing pretty much, which can't argue with that. So Rivera really, he didn't he smash out Brimage. That really surprised me because
Yeah.
he didn't seem, I mean, he's a decent striker, Tiger Shulman guy. And actually, it's been a little while, but a couple of years ago there was an influx of Tiger Shulman guys, and they all proved to be, not only savvy MMA guys, but really well-rounded. And Rivera at first was kind of a wrestle boxer. I kind of had him pegged as,
Mm-hmm.
but steadily evolving, and a tough dude, smart, and he's well-rounded enough to be able to make changes, as needed. But to me, Munoz is a little more technically polished. I definitely would give him the submission grappling edge, and I've always thought that he was destined to kind of break through for a while. So I'm going to go with Munoz here.
Worth noting briefly before I jump over to Connor that Munoz is coming off a drug test failure. I believe he battled it for a long time, but the end result was the agreement. Basically, was that I think may have ended up taking, claimed he took a supplement that he shouldn't have or something like that, and this is his year suspension coming up.
It was kind of a fishy thing though. Like his
Yeah.
from what I heard from Pat Wyman, his testosterone was high but within normal range, and his TE ratio was not strange, so it didn't
Yeah.
necessarily indicate steroid use. And then the commission just didn't have a B sample, so they just decided that he was suspended. It was
Well,
like
the
Montreal
UFC
or
did the
something.
testing and flagged his test, so it
Yeah.
was really on the UFC. But I think the end, like that was the initial story, but I believe like the thing that just came out recently was like they did a CIR test too and found synthetic testosterone. So he ended up agreeing to a year-long suspension.
Maybe.
So I
So that
don't
was
know.
a win over Jared Sanders that got changed to a no contest, correct?
I don't believe it actually did get changed. I know it did. Yeah, it did. It did get overturned. Okay, so yeah. Anyway, Connor.
Pedro Munoz, huge potential. He's one of those guys in this card who's kind of a finished prospect. Like he's only a prospect in the sense that he has yet to get that big fight or to break through as a. So I describe these guys as like contenders to be. Like Rashid Magomedov is on that same kind of track. A couple guys in this card are like that. and he's just really well-rounded. He's shown that he's found his confidence on the feet since starting to train with Rafael Cordeiro. He's really turned into a similar fighter to Rafael dos Anjos, kind of a steady, relentless pressure fighter with the ability to move around and box if he needs to. And then he's also got really underrated wrestling. And phenomenal jiu-jitsu, of course, and he is a killer with his submissions. He will snatch up the guillotine in the blink of an eye. He's got 2 fights in his record, both under a minute submissions by guillotine, and they were both very similar. The one was it's no longer on his record, the Gerard Sanders submission. And then there was one over Bailey Daniels in his last fight in RFA in 2014. Both guys shot because you quickly realize that it's not just a guy who wants to take you down. This guy's here to take your head off. And he just immediately wraps up a killer arm-in guillotine. Just very dangerous in every phase. And then Jimmy Rivera, super well-rounded fighter as well. He does have a good wrestling game that he can go back on, but I think he's to his credit, he's really found his power as a kickboxer more recently. He's got nice combination punching. He adds kicks together. He's really kind of naturally a counterpuncher. And he did that against Brimage, and he's a hair trigger counterpuncher. When Brimage was throwing at him, he was countering every single thing that Brimage committed to and just blew him out of the water in like 45 seconds. A minute and a half is how long that fight lasted. So I think Rivera is definitely a threat. If he does hit as hard as it seems that he's been able to lately, and he's a serious challenge for Munoz coming in, and I do think Munoz will be trying to come in. But I think ultimately Munoz is durable. He's got solid skills in every phase. I think he's going to get Rivera against the fence and drag him down, probably submit him late in the fight.
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, Rivera, I think too, to me, is maybe not future contender, but he's in that similar situation where he's been fighting for long enough now that he's not really a prospect. What we've seen lately is that he's got to that point where it's like now he's hitting his prime. And that's what we're seeing. We're suddenly seeing, as he hit his prime, he's become a really powerful knockout artist. And unfortunately, watching a lot of his old fights where he was winning by decision and stuff like that, his wrestling is not quite as good as it should be. Like
he does timing with his takedowns when he'll get a body lock as somebody charges into him.
Yeah, he's got some good reactive takedowns, but he doesn't have a great natural shot. He's much more the kind of guy who's going to press you against the cage. Like in a lot of his former decisions, he would just be against the cage, wearing on guys, trying to land little shots. It wasn't like he was just taking them down and laying on them and out wrestling them and out positioning them. Very clinch heavy. And that could leave, I almost worry if that could leave him a little one-dimensional in the UFC as somebody who's more reliant on his boxing than anything else. And if he can't hurt Munoz, that I could see him getting to the point where he ends up getting taken down, where he ends up being pressured out of his game. So
it's kind of interesting though, because Rivera's pretty burly in the clinch. He's a strong guy. So he's 5'4", Munoz is 5'6". Would you say Munoz is tall for a bantamweight, or Rivera is short?
Rivera's short.
Rivera's short. Rivera went to a lot of like a higher volume, but Patricio Pitbull.
Mm-hmm.
But Munoz isn't really like a traditional change levels and shoot a double or single. I mean, he can, but he gets a lot of his takedowns from the clinch, and Rivera's pretty tough there, so that kind of adds
He's a no-gi grappler guy, and he has that trip and drag wrestling game.
He does have, like Rafael dos Anjos, he has a decent double leg against the fence, but it's more like a suck your hips out from under you double. He's not an explosive takedown artist. I will say, on the Heavy Hands this week, Pat was telling me a story about somebody, I wish I could remember who it was, a wrestling guy, trained with Pedro Munoz and hadn't heard him speak, didn't know he was from Brazil, and just assumed he was like a Latino American and thought he was an American wrestler because of his wrestling ability. So according to wrestling people, and you can see in his takedowns, he's very effective. When he wants somebody down, he does get him down. He's just not like he's not a GSP with like this incredible timing and blasting you off your feet.
Yeah, it is interesting because I do, like I say, I think this is a top 15 bantamweight fight right now.
Sure.
Like, these guys should be ranked over some of the guys who are at the bottom of the end of the bantamweight division. Top 15. So it's a tough one to call. I think you kind of have to favor Munoz just because he's durable and he's dangerous on the ground in a way that Rivera isn't. But man, Rivera's got the huge power advantage on the feet, I think, which that could be troublesome. So odds on this are Munoz coming in at as the favorite -162 up to -180. Rivera, the underdog, +150 down to +135. So not a big spread there. It's a great fight. I'm leaning Munoz, but I would be 0% surprised if Rivera pulled a huge upset there. Next up, Viscardi Andrade, Hassan Umalatov. Connor, once again, you have about a minute.
Bad fight. This is the worst fight on the card. No offense to these gentlemen, though I'm sure if they're watching, I'm about to offend them. Viscardi Andrade, very clunky striking. He hits hard, and that's about it. Throws himself off balance nearly every time he strikes. He is a very good jiu-jitsu player, but has kind of struggled to make that work against a higher level of competition. Umalatov, pretty good at everything with like no fighter's instinct, like defensive to a fault, chooses one single shot and just lets fights slip through his fingers. With 10 decisions, 4 of his have been splits, which is pretty crazy unless you're a Gleison Tibau to have that many split decisions. So, and not all of them he's won. He lost a split decision to Cahal Pendred, our favorite fighter. So, I'm gonna pick Andrade because he hits harder, and I think he's a little more willing to go for it. But it's not a fight that, this would be a good chance to go and get a drink between Rivera Munoz and.
All right, you've already spent way too much time. Dallas, thoughts?
Congrats, Zane. That was impressive. I think it's mostly Umalatov's fault that this fight is because I've been waiting for him to make any kind of impression on me throughout there's just nothing. I mean, there's nothing terrible you can say about him, but there's nothing really bad you can say about him either. Way too patient, too defensively focused. He has skills, he's not absent of skill in any one area, but it's just his fights seem really monotonous, as evinced by the split decisions. Andrade, I don't mind that dude at all. I kind of like him. He's, to me, a jiu-jitsu guy who wants to expand and improve his other areas, and it's not uncommon to see a guy take kind of the Dan Henderson route, although he'll wing him with both hands, and he's a mean bastard. If he connects, it's gonna leave a mark. So I don't want to say I was really impressed with him, but through a couple of his fights, he's a ferocious dude, and he's got a really talented ground game. So just for the fact of everything I said about Umalatov, I hope Andrade can just go throw something heavy and finish him on the ground.
Yeah, I think my only worries for this fight are that Andrade may not have the gas tank to keep his style of fight going for very long, and Umalatov tends to. Umalatov, I remember when he fought Cathal Pendred, I was like, wow. Not only do they look exactly alike, but it's like they're like twin brothers where Cathal got all the athletic ability and Umalatov got all the skill. and neither one had any of the other. And so you just Umalatov has he's got a pretty technical wrestling, even pocket boxing, grappling, all those things he does pretty well, but he's not much of an athlete at all. He's just weak, frankly, as a fighter. He's just he's not strong enough to implement his game. And I guess I'll take Andrade because he's exciting, but I think if it goes past a round and a half, I would pick Umalatov to probably take an ugly decision.
Yeah, I doubt that Andrade can knock Umalatov out. He's hard to finish, and he's got pretty solid defense. Like we said, he doesn't do anything badly except just fight. He's not good at it. But all the skill sets are not that bad. You know who Andrade reminds me of? He reminds me of Paulo Thiago.
Yeah.
Anytime I see him throw a punch, I just envision Paulo Thiago knocking out.
Who Umalatov beat. On that note, we're moving ahead. Andrade. is the underdog, a little surprisingly to me, plus 103 up to plus 110. Oh, no, minus 105 even to plus 110. And Umalatov is the favorite, minus 117 up to minus 130. So, I mean, if you feel like there's play to be made, you can get uh well, you can't get Molotov. I don't know. Don't bet on this fight. What the fuck are you doing? What's wrong with you if you're betting on this fight? All right. On that note, that's the end of the Fight Pass prelims. We're now on Fox Sports 1. Kevin Souza, Chaz Skelly, Dallas, take it away.
This is a tough one because I really like both of these cats. I think Chaz Skelly is a guy that has earned the respect of a lot of people. And this is a nice assembly of really solid MMA boxing on this card. Because Nicolaou, who we already talked about, Souza is just like laser straight, excellent boxing, and Thomas Almeida is another guy we'll talk about later that I really very functional boxing style for MMA. I assume this is kind of what you guys are going to boil down to striker versus grappler. Not that it's that simple, but a lot of those principles apply. Chaz Skelly cannot hang out on the fringe or in boxing range with Souza. I think if anything, he's kind of Souza is, I mean, very precise. He's the kind of dude that he's technical and he doesn't have to swing for the fences because everything is just perfect rhythm, perfect timing, excellent counters. But I think Chaz Skelly is going to get the advantage anytime in any range other than free movement. So clinch, grappling, and I think that's going to dictate what range they're both going to want to be at. I don't have it in front of me, but I don't know if Souza has fought another guy who is going to obviously pressure him and want to get in close and not stand with him as much as Chaz Skelly will. And to me, it's interesting because Skelly's fearless. He's going to find a way, and his striking isn't terrible by any means, but I would say rudimentary, still functional. But his bread and butter is going to want to be get into the clinch. So to me, it's going to be a real interesting matchup. I usually tend to favor the grappler in these because for his thing to work, usually it's more advantageous where the other guys either got to damage him or put him out before he gets put on his back. But I don't know why I'm kind of leaning Souza here. But either way, like both of these guys, I think it's going to be close and wouldn't be surprised to see either win or lose.
Connor?
Yeah, I do see this one as a striker versus grappler matchup, but there are a couple caveats that change that. I think it's striker versus grappler in that Chaz Skelly has the very clear advantage on the ground. He is extremely aggressive, very smooth. He's one of those guys who's really cut out to fight off of his back if he needs to, because he does not stop working for sweeps and submissions. You're off balance, you can't get off punches, and then suddenly he's on top of you or he's on your back. His back takes are phenomenal, especially the way he traps opponents into them. He'll let you think that you're finding a way out from under him, and then suddenly he's latched on behind you and you're getting choked to sleep. Kevin Souza, very technical boxer, good straight punches, relies a lot on a very hard laser-guided right hand. Not a lot of volume in combinations, but he does keep up a good pace in terms of just frequent pot shotting. And I think that makes him really dangerous for Chaz Skelly on the feet, because Skelly has proven to be very, very hittable in the past. The thing is that it's not entirely Souza's game on the feet here, because Skelly has proven just an inability to really get outstruck. Like, most of his opponents are better strikers than him from a technical perspective, and Skelly just does not care. If he gets hit, he responds to being hurt with all-out aggression. It's like he stops pretending that he knows how to be a good defensive fighter. He just sets all that aside and goes after you. He'll charge into the clinch, he will swing away, and he's got pretty solid timing, like intangibles of striking, that make him a dangerous guy to contend with on the feet, even if he looks weird and off balance as a striker. So I think just by virtue of having more advantages on his side, you've got to go with Skelly. He's just and I haven't been really impressed with what I've seen, what little I've seen of Souza on the ground. I would describe his takedown defense as kind of shallow. Like, he's got a good initial sprawl, but those guys who have been able to kind of chain wrestle with him, which I know Skelly can do very well, have typically been able to get him down, and then it's just like he's just kind of waiting. He's got that Anderson Silva trap and wait approach. So I've got to go with Skelly, probably by a late submission.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I remember from the Ehlers fight, especially, it was seeing that Skelly is starting to get some of his timing on his feet to land big single shots. Like his combination striking, his distance control, a lot of the things that would make him a good striker still aren't there. But he has the ability to land that one shot that makes you a little bit wary of him and then lets him rush in. Like what he's starting to remind me of is of Darren Elkins with a really good back take game. You know? Like he's got that same style of charge in just totally fearlessly, and he will find a way to get you into the clinch, into the ground. But unlike Elkins, who tends to just kind of be a ride, and Elkins is a very good sort of ride point fighter. Skelly seems to have a much more determined back take to choke game.
Yeah.
Souza, I love Souza. He's my favorite. He's like my cult favorite featherweight. That guy that I like just without any inkling that he's ever going to be a top contender. I love watching him fight, but this is a tough matchup. He's not a great wrestler. He's got a great stance. That helps him a lot with his wrestling and takedown defense, but it's really the stance and not the technical skill around it.
Agreed. Stance and footwork.
Yep. I think he's got a great, like, prototypical MMA striking game with the sort of hands down, but really good straight punches, great head movement, great distance control, high output.
He's like a featherweight Chuck Liddell.
Yeah.
Except straight. Like when you said he doesn't pile on combinations, he doesn't, because I'd say 80% of his punches are some combination of a 1-2.
Yep.
1-1-1-2, and that's like the most effective use of such a basic punch.
Sure. 1-2s are like lead rights, and he attacks head and body, so it makes those. He doesn't have to string them together so much, but it also kind of relies on the opponent respecting his striking.
Yeah, and Skelly's exactly the kind of guy who's just going to close him down and jump on him. And and with the current metagame, I would not be at all surprised to see Souza just give up his back and see Skelly just jump on it, even if it wasn't off a takedown, like we saw with Rose Namajunas, Angela Hill, like that kind of choke. I could see that pretty easily. So I do go Skelly here. He is the favorite, minus 151 up to minus 175. Souza is the underdog, plus 130 or plus 140 down to plus 130 or 125. Still close odds. Every fight we're talking about here, really thin odds. So fun fight. I can see it going either way, but I think Skelly's a pretty clear favorite. Up next, Clay Guida, Thiago Tavares. Connor?
I loved Clay Guida's fight with Robbie Peralta. I thought he looked renewed. I thought he looked like the best version of Clay Guida we've seen in a long, long time. He really seemed to have found his footing again, because he has always been a dangerous, explosive wrestler. And, a guy who will get in your face and drag you down and ragdoll you around the octagon. And I was so sick of seeing those kind of performances like the one he turned in against Gray Maynard. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, this is not your game. You don't, like, I know you got the cardio, but cardio itself is not a weapon if you're not using it aggressively. So I've got hope for Clay Guida's resurgence, and I think he can probably be a really solid gatekeeper at featherweight. And though the odds are pretty close in this fight, I don't really see Thiago Tavares having a good shot here. Clay has been submitted, and Thiago has a good submission game, but he also doesn't have great fight IQ to go along with it. He's aggressive, but not necessarily technically tight. So against good fighters who don't freak out when you just jump on a guillotine and fall to your back, that's not gonna get the job done. And Clay Guida has more experience than just about anybody else in the game today. So, he's not gonna, it's Clay Guida here. He's fought a lot of guys and done very well for a very long career. So I favor Guida here by decision. And
all right, Dallas.
Minor tangent, and I'll be quick since you're cutting people off today, Zane. Just kidding. We suggested you do so.
All right, Connor.
No, we encourage you to do so. I was supporting you. I was showing my support. But before the Guida and Maynard fight, it was one of the few fights that I felt like it was Maynard all the way because I thought, what the hell can Clay Guida do? Maynard's a better boxer and he's a better wrestler. So what's he going to do? And he found some way, albeit kind of weird and not fun to watch. So either way, to me, that's how Clay Guida is. I mean, the dude will do whatever's within his mental and physical capabilities to get a win. That's why the crowd loves him. Um, Tavares is going to be fast. I think he's going to have a big speed advantage. He's going to be a little bit smaller. I agree he's a better submission fighter, but I won't tangent off on the judging in Guida Hioki. But if Clay can not tap to Hatsu Hioki, I don't see Tavares getting him unless it's something weird in the scramble or if he snatches up a Kimura. So I would not be surprised really to see Tavares win because he's actually, if he lands, he's got quick hands, and if he lands clean, it can put people out. But to me, Guida's going to be the steady grinder. I don't know if Tavares is just going to be able to stop the steady grind. So
And it's worth pointing out that Chad Mendes is still the only man who's ever knocked Clay Guida out, and he still didn't have him out cold. I mean, the guy has a chin.
Yeah, couple of things. Tavares too strikes me as one of those guys who kind of like Andrade, like he can't really quite keep the pace he sets.
Mm.
He likes to come out just hair trigger, going 100 miles an hour, and then he fades. And the longer the fight goes, the less well everything works. He also is notoriously not durable. Clay Guida's not the guy to test that. Guida's not the guy who's going to knock him out. But every time it seems like Tavares does just kind of let his hands go and let himself run away and like really try to outwork somebody, he gets cracked, and then he has to jump back and try and figure out a new approach to the fight. And yeah, I think this is just one of those cases where Guida may not be able to hurt Tavares, but I don't see Tavares hurting Guida, and then it's just going to be Guida's better wrestling. And I think the big thing that Alpha Male has done, and I agree with Dallas on the thing with that Maynard fight being really Guida's only path to victory there. But it feels like Guida kind of maybe that approach, and I think that was a good Jackson game plan. Like do find your way in, but I think that approach may have kind of sucked away some of his confidence over the long term. Like against every time he faced a big puncher after that Chad Mendes, Dennis Bermudez, it was just kind of like I'm just going to kind of hop around on the edge and try and see what I can do to wait out the fight. And I think Alpha Male has his fight with Robbie Peralta, it kind of seems like Alpha Male has sort of reinvigorated him as like somebody who's not afraid to just jump in there and actually try to outwork somebody in wrestling, in the clinch, in close, and be a little more fearless, and I think that's going to really help him with Tavares. Really? So I would definitely pick Guida here as a favorite. Quick odds, and then any last thoughts on that? Guida is the favorite. He's minus 152 up to minus 170. Thiago Tavares is the underdog, plus 135 up to plus 141. All right. Connor, you're muted.
Guida was saying after that fight, like how much fun he had traveling around and going to Team Alpha Male. I think you're right. Like he really did seem reinvigorated. Like he enjoyed being in there and fighting Robbie Peralta again. As smart a game plan as it may have been, I don't think telling Guida that you need to stay away and protect yourself is really the best game plan for him. Like he thrives on confidence. And I would love to see that guy return because he used to be a blast to watch.
Well, and Team Alpha Male is the perfect place for him to go because before he was a decent, not a highly credentialed wrestler, but a good wrestler with average striking. And there's a lot of guys at Alpha Male that weren't huge standouts in wrestling, but I mean, as far as wrestle boxing and making your entries work and your striking effective, Team Alpha Male's proven they know how to do that shit.
Sure. Well, and the big thing that Team Alpha Male teaches, like their big strategy is you hit a takedown, you immediately look for a submission or a striking opportunity, and then you reset. And I think that fits into Guida's game plan really well because he is so high energy and he can work so hard to get multiple takedowns that having that focus on, like, hit the takedown, is there a submission there? No, then get out. Hit him on the way up, hit another takedown.
Guida's like a less talented Khabib Nurmagomedov. Like that rinse and repeat fighting style works really well for him.
So I think Alpha Male could be a great fit for him in the latter stages of his career, help him extend it out just a little further. As long as his chin holds. Once his chin goes, he goes with it. That brings us up next to Jan Cabral, Johnny Case. Bit of a sleeper fight. Dallas, thoughts?
I think, yeah, sleeper fight, and both of these guys are kind of sleepers in the division because I was super impressed with Johnny Case when he came on, but he's yet to really get tested, and this is a really solid test for him. And Cabral is a sleeper too. I mean, doesn't he have real legit jiu-jitsu credentials? Like he won the Moondials or so, and he's always tricky because he seems one-dimensional, but he finds a way to kind of protect his weaknesses and make it work. And he's a killer on the ground. So I think Johnny Case has the fighting style to stay upright because I know he's a pretty physically powerful dude. He's good in the clinch. Cabral's another guy like we talked about earlier. He's more of a clinch takedown guy. Not that he can't, but his bread and butter isn't changing levels in sequence and hitting a single or a double. And I do think that favors Case, but I'm not sure if Case can, be bulletproof through all 3 rounds of keeping Cabral on him and off him. And I do think that Cabral, it's almost like a puncher's chance. If he gets his hands on you, there's a good chance the fight will be done right then. If it's not, there's a slightly lower chance he's going to ride the round out and win the round. So this is a really good fight. I don't know how it's going to play out. It could play out. If Case was smart, he would just use his boxing, use his clinch defensively, and keep Cabral at range. That might not make for the most exciting game plan. And usually Johnny Case is highly aggressive. He goes and tears into people. That's why I've taken notice of him. That's why I like to watch him fight. But that is not the wisest strategy against Cabral. So I'll probably go with Case, but this is one that I could see going either way.
Connor?
I think it's worth pointing out that Cabral was formerly competing as a welterweight. Like against, I think, Zach Cummins, David Mitchell, those were welterweight opponents. Yeah. And he did really well against Zach Cummins. Very competitive fight, and Cummins was just too big for him. So I think being down at lightweight now, he looked mean against Naoyuki Kotani in that fight. Not the kind of guy that typically beats Naoyuki Kotani either, because it's not like he beat him by being a better MMA fighter. He just straight up out jiu-jitsu'd him. And that's the scary thing about Jan Cabral, is he is a really, really dangerous grappler. He's got 12 wins and 11 of them are submissions. He's a destroyer when he gets you on your back. And I agree with Dallas. That gives him like the grappler's version of a puncher's chance here. I think Case has the more well-rounded game, and I am favoring him. But if Cabral gets him to the ground, he's just got this methodical, relentless, pressuring approach. He will slice through your guard, he'll get your back, and he will choke you out. So I think, oddly, this fight has some of the widest odds we've seen on the undercards so far, and yet I think this is one of the ones where Cabral really is a really dangerous live dog.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with just how inconsistent Cabral has been on getting into the cage, frankly. Like, he's taken a year off now, and before that, it was like 6 months off, and he just hasn't been able to fight with the kind of regularity that gets him noticed. Mm-hmm. But he's definitely dangerous, definitely has a lot to offer. He's right in the prime of his career. So, Case is almost certainly going to be facing the best version of him, but to that point, so's Case. I mean, Case is a young guy, and he seems like a young up-and-comer, but he's also been fighting since 2007 and fighting constantly. So it's 2 really well-seasoned veteran fighters. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, Case has got a really great striking game, and he's got a good submission game. He's a great 3-dimensional fighter, great 3-dimensional threat. I honestly felt like it's weird to see him leave Alliance for me, because I felt more than anyone he seemed to take to their style of striking.
I didn't know he left Alliance.
Yep, he's at Power MMA now. part of the big exodus from Alliance, that like
Oh
five
yeah.
top fighters left. Um, but he really seemed to take to that like Dominic Cruz style better than almost any other fighter I've seen out of that camp.
It did really change him though, because he was a very aggressive combination striker before Alliance, and he did fall into that kind of. He did okay with it, but it was the same kind of style that ruined guys like Norman Park and like
Miles Jury.
yeah, right, where it just kind of took away their killer instinct. So maybe he was hoping to get that back.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. It just seemed like he more than anyone else seemed to really like work in that system.
Hmm.
And so it'll be interesting to see what he looks like now that he's gone off to Power MMA. Yeah, I think I would pick. Actually, I might. I don't know. I might pick Cabral on this because Case is not a knockout striker. He's not the kind of guy who's gonna just blast you with one shot and wreck your night. And at that point, and he's a very willing grappler, so I could see him being very willing to tangle with Cabral on the ground.
And Cabral, like many Nova União fighters, is a very good wrestler as well.
Yeah, and Cabral has a really, really powerful, high octane kicking game. Just, super hard body, leg, and head kicks. Underrated for it. Really venomous kicker. So I could see him making making Case want to close distance on him just by snapping off a lot of kicks and make Case want to close him down. Draws you right into the body, to the clinch, and could make this fight more interesting. So I might actually lean Cabral for an upset.
Yeah.
Odds on this: Cabral is the underdog, plus 257 down to plus 200. Johnny Case is the favorite, minus 300 down to minus 275. I think it's a really close, well-matched fight, frankly. After that, we've got top of the prelims, top of Fox Sports 1, last prelim, Gleison Tibau, Abel Trujillo. Connor?
I've already invoked Tibau's name once on this broadcast, the king of the split decision, the gatekeeper of lightweight. I think he's going to beat Abel Trujillo. I think he's going to weather an early storm, and I really think an early storm is the best shot Trujillo has in any fight, particularly because Tibau is a highly underrated kickboxer. He really is not a bad striker. He's improved in that facet greatly over the past few years. He's got a good straight left. He's got good movement. He knows how to punch his way into the clinch, which is where his real strength has always been. And Trujillo is one of those guys who he's like a lightweight Leonard Garcia. Like, no matter what technical improvements he makes from one fight to the next, it just goes away the moment he gets hit, and he just turns into a crazy brawler. Fortunately for him, he's got more power than Garcia ever had, but he also gasses out after a round once he's gotten to a slugfest. So I think he'll probably hit Tibau a few times early, but I think Tibau will be able to kind of drown him in the deep waters down the stretch.
Dallas?
I'd be interested to hear what Abel's answer is on what the strengths of his game are. And I don't know if I'm correct, but I remember seeing him get the Thai plum on somebody when he was first coming up, and just
Roger Bowling, he mauled him in the clinch.
Brutalized him, and I thought, holy shit, because he's a good wrestler. He's definitely got wrestling skills, but to me, at his most violent and effective was in the clinch. And I also wonder that because against a guy like Tibau, I'm curious what his strategy is going to be. I think Tibau's definitely more technical and the cleaner striker with his hands at range, and I'm not so sure that the answer for Trujillo is just to cut an angle, get inside, and either body lock or try to clinch or try to wrestle him. Even those are there's nothing easy to do against Gleison Tibau. So I guess, I don't know, at this point, I think Tibau, unless Trujillo does have that characteristic where he can explode with something, just ungodly violent.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, yeah, and I like that about him. And he's going to have to do that, I think, in this, because if he doesn't, and the fight just kind of, on a metronome just keeps going at the same pace, Tibau is just going to grind him down, whether it's with takedowns, with boxing on the feet. So I don't know. I don't see a lot of ways for Trujillo to win this.
I would say that if we see Tibau lose this is probably the sign that he's no longer Gleison Tibau. because the first inkling we might have of that, and it's not a big one, but the small one is Tony Ferguson just dismantling him in under a round. You
Tony
know,
Ferguson's out of his fucking mind right now. Am I right?
Tony Ferguson's a hell of a good fighter. He's on a real run, but that's like the first time in his long career, even with guys he's lost to, that he's ever lost in the first round.
Yeah, and his two most recent losses were both almost knockouts. Ferguson just about knocked him out and then submitted him, and Michael Johnson knocked him out in 2 rounds. 3 fights before that.
So Trujillo, like, even though obviously he's got the power, like I think we're gonna know a lot about this fight when Trujillo hurts Tibau, because at some point he probably will, and if he finishes him, then that tells us something about Gleison Tibau, and if Tibau can fire back and hurt Trujillo, then he can make Trujillo's game a mess.
Yeah.
Because Trujillo, I mean, I think the key really with him is that, and when you talk about the clinch, Trujillo, the reason he's such a great clinch fighter is because that's the only place he's comfortable being an offensive striker. He's otherwise very much a pure counterpuncher at range. He wants you to open yourself up, throw the first shot, and then he'll come back in with the crystal clear, sharp hook that's just perfectly technical. But when he has to be an aggressive striker at range, and he's a very willing aggressive striker, he's just a mess. Like, when you hit him and he's like, okay, now I got to be aggressive.
Yeah, it's almost like he's an willing striker. Like there's like a lack of confidence there. Like he gets hit and he just loses his cool. Like he feels like he has to prove to you that you didn't hurt him.
And so, the clinch, that's like where he's comfortable being aggressive because he has control. He has body control. Yeah. And he's so strong and so powerful that I'm sure he feels confident that he can muscle anyone around in the clinch. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this fight more than anything is going to say a lot about Gleison Tibau. Because dude's been fighting since 1999. He may not be far north of 30, but he has been fighting since 6 years after this sport started. Gleison Tibau was fighting in it.
Do we actually believe that Gleison Tibau is 32?
It's got to be some kind of like dog years correlation.
Yeah, it looks like he's 45 at least.
Maybe according to
I know. I have. If it were any other sport, I would not believe it. But because it's MMA, I have no problem believing that he was like 14 and fighting dudes.
He's got to be one of the last 99ers around, though, right? Because we had like
him, Belfort, Henderson,
Edwards, Vitor, yep, and let's see.
Jake Shields is still around.
Jake Shields, yeah, nice. Right off the top of your head, too. That's impressive. But that's becoming a dying club, real quick.
Oh yeah. But so yeah, odds on this: Trujillo is the underdog. But basically, we're dead even. Trujillo is plus 100 down to minus 110. Gleison Tibau is minus 110 down to minus 130. So
it's a little closer than I expected.
I think it's really gonna be like I think I feel it's almost safe to say that Trujillo will hurt Gleison Tibau at some point early in this fight because he is so fast and so powerful, and it usually takes guys like a round to adjust to that with him. And it's just all about what happens after he hurts him.
And with what we've seen from Tibau lately, I can see why the odds would be close because last 2 times he's been hurt, he has lost.
Yeah. All right. On that note, first fight of the main card: Fabio Maldonado, Corey Anderson. Where was I?
Is it me?
Earth.
Okay, Connor, take it away.
Corey Anderson, I was like, in his last fight with Jan Blachowicz, I was like, oh, what a shame. This guy's in such a shallow division. He's not ready and he has to step up. He proved me wrong. He mauled Jan Blachowicz really impressively. I think he's really making some vast improvements very quickly, and I think this is the perfect next fight for him because it's a guy with very clearly delineated strengths and very clearly delineated weaknesses. Fabio Maldonado, dangerous if you fight his game, completely neutered if you put him on his back, and he's not hard to put on his back. So I think we're going to see Corey Anderson do that, and that's basically it. Corey Anderson by decision. I would be surprised if he knocked Maldonado out, because nobody has Maldonado's willingness or ability to absorb punishment. But I do think we'll see him on top of Maldonado for 3 rounds, beating him up with short ground and pound.
Dallas?
Yeah, it's like every Maldonado fight. Although he does have some sting in his punches. I almost said power, but I mean it's not like you can
Like
walk
snap.
through his punches and he's just gonna like
He's got the Nick
lower his
Diaz
head.
style, where it's like 5 really weak ones, and then suddenly he just cracks you.
Well, and every once in a while from range he'll, and I can't
Yeah.
remember who it was, but it was like a long left that he unfurled from range and it stunned somebody, and I was
He
like, oh my
almost knocked
god.
Glover Teixeira out.
That's what it was. It was in the Teixeira fight. But still, I mean, he's getting too old. His game is just too transparent. And this is like the other side of the spectrum where Corey Anderson's really athletic, all full of piss and vinegar, still on his way up. Um, but no matter what the matchup says, Maldonado is an easy out for almost no one, So, and really, he's still super crafty. He trains with a bunch of super pimps, and he's a solid. He's not an easy dude to topple, but I don't think it'll be simple, but I think Corey Anderson has all the tools to do that, and I agree with Connor. His wrestling and top game should get him there.
The big thing with Corey Anderson, the difference for me in this fight, the reason I really feel safe picking Corey Anderson is, unlike John Vellante, unlike Roger Hollett, unlike James McSweeney, even Kyle Kingsbury, and even Igor Pokrajic, who have had very competitive fights with Fabio Maldonado. Corey Anderson's got a gas tank. Like, he can fight for 3 rounds and fight hard for 3 rounds. And that's what we've seen for him in every fight. I mean, that's what we saw. Like, his loss against Vellante, the whole reasoning behind that was his inability to check the leg kick. He was not prepared for kicks. And as he became, as his front leg weakened, he had to put more faith on it. He had to put more focus on it. He put less focus on his boxing. And eventually he ate shots. But it wasn't because he gassed or because he just wasn't ready. He was beating Vellante up for most of that fight. And then, as we saw against in his last fight against Jan Blachowicz, he was just had no problem taking Blachowicz down and outworking him for 3 rounds. So if Corey Anderson didn't have that gas tank, I would feel a lot less safe picking him, because Maldonado is the kind of guy that you can beat the crap out of him for 2 rounds, and then he will just lean on you for that 3rd round and pound you into a paste. But yeah, it's got to be Anderson all the way for this. If he loses, it's a testament to his bad fight IQ. The odds on that are pretty much in that line. Maldonado is the underdog, plus 370 up to plus 430. Anderson is the favorite, minus 480 or 477, all the way up to minus 600. So a pretty clear favorite there, and it's a little oversized for Maldonado's general quality, but it's just poison on paper. And Maldonado is one of those guys too. He's close to the 99 club, started fighting in 2000, so he is weathered. All right, next up we have Gilbert Burns, Rashid Magomedov, hot fire, bout of the night. Dallas, take it away.
Hot fire. So I always think that Magomedov is going to get taken down eventually. Like but it doesn't happen. And his striking is pretty sick for a man of his stature, which is crazy. I mean, you just don't see it that often. I can't think of a lot of heavyweights that had his kind of a
That's
dynamic
Ruslan
kickboxing.
Magomedov you're thinking of.
Yes. Who are we talking about?
Rashid Magomedov.
Oh, right. Connor, over to you.
All right, Connor.
Well, a lot of the things that you might say about Ruslan really apply to Rashid as well, except that Rashid is like even quicker, lighter of foot. Rashid, master of sport in both boxing and hand-to-hand combat, which to my understanding is like Russian military fighting, like Spetsnaz shit. So that's pretty scary. And he's Rashid Magomedov is a fighter that you're a snob if you like if you really like him, and I'm a snob, so I really like him. But like it's because you have to say something like, "Oh, he's not gonna thrill you, but he's really fascinating to watch." But that's just the way it is. Like he's not a knockout puncher, but he effortlessly hurts almost every single opponent he fights. Like he hasn't fought a person in the UFC yet who he hasn't come pretty close to knocking out without really seeming to try. And you might hold it against him that he doesn't go for the kill when that happens, but he's he's just very slick with his striking, very technical, and I love watching him fight because you can really clearly see thought process behind everything he does. He's a very cerebral fighter who plans and thinks and strategizes constantly throughout every fight. I'm not really sure why they matched Gilbert Burns up with him. As much as I love this fight, um, Gilbert Burns, I don't really think has a very good chance here, and it's unfortunate because Burns has huge potential as a prospect. He's a fantastic submission grappler. He's physically fit. He's explosive. He's strong. And when you watch him fight somebody who's more inexperienced, he kind of looks like a good striker. You're like, oh, okay, like his technique is coming along. Then we saw him in that Cowboy Oliveira fight. He started to get tagged, and you realize that, like Kevin Souza's takedown defense, his striking is really pretty shallow. There's not a lot of depth to or context really to his striking. Where once it's actually tested and he has to experience mental duress, it starts to kind of fall apart. And he's a pretty solid takedown artist, but Magomedov is very difficult to take down. Very difficult. I remember when Rodrigo Dam got his leg on his own shoulder in a single leg attempt, and Magomedov was like still hitting him and just slipped out of it and walked away. And he's a solid submission grappler too. So Burns, he's got that Hail Mary submission skill that we saw against Cowboy Oliveira. That makes him a threat. He has that puncher's chance on the ground that we said about Jan Cabral before. But really, I just kind of see him losing the decision to Magomedov, one that gets more and more dominant as the fight goes on, and as Magomedov starts to learn and adapt to his weaknesses.
Dallas, thoughts?
You guys should have just let me go through that and not said anything.
Not
Not only would it have been funnier, but it probably would have been my best analysis of the day. But in my defense, not this is excusable. But I told them before my computer was wigging out. I had like a little time to research, and I almost had to cancel. So, but
No, you're cool. There are 500 fighters in this promotion.
well,
you know.
I got the R first name and the last name 100% right, everybody. But
And they're actually not completely dissimilar fighters, which makes it
No.
even more difficult.
well, and I should have caught it when he was, when he was going to fight Gilbert Burns, but I think Connor covered that most handily. Although I was going to give Burns a decent chance in this one, just because he's kind of a behemoth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very similar to the Cabral fight and kind of that puncher's. We should come up with a crafty or a nickname for that puncher's chance for a grappler.
Joker's chance.
What was that?
Joker's chance.
That's actually pretty damn good. Right off the top of your head. So, I might even. Well, I pretty much fucked this entire fight up from A to Z. So let me pick Burns just to maybe either make it amazing or like
All right.
most embarrassing.
On that
thing
note,
ever.
yeah, the thing, like, I would say one of the things that makes, we did lose Connor, but one of the things that I love with watching Rashid Magomedov is, and this is something that I think, he'll get credit for someday. If he can become, he should become a top-ranked lightweight. There's no reason for him not to. And if he does, I feel like it's basically like Jędrzejczyk, and I had one other name on this I was trying to think of, and I lost it right now. But he and Jędrzejczyk are like two of the main fighters. Oh, and Jose Aldo are the three fighters in the UFC who I would say have perfect takedown defense. Like, just you never see them make a technical mistake. They might get taken down every now and then.
Who was your third?
Jose Aldo,
In Jędrzejczyk and
Jędrzejczyk, and Rashid Magomedov.
really?
Yep. And just in terms of takedown defense, just technically their ability to stop the shot and to stay on their feet, they are at like if you watch their process on it, they do everything perfectly every time. It's like super multi-layered. as deep as it gets. And so that makes this fight incredibly tough on Burns. Like, he really has to hit the perfect takedown and then keep it. And that's a hell of a hard thing because, Magomedov, and the biggest chance he has, and this is probably the biggest point of opportunity that Burns has, is that Magomedov is also a pure counter striker, and this is also why he doesn't get a lot of knockouts, because he will just absolutely, you have to come to him for him to strike. You have to throw at him, and if you don't, he's more than happy to just kind of like wait on the outside, throw a few kicks, bide his time.
To exchange, like
Yeah.
he will pepper you and win a comfortable decision.
Yeah.
But he does need you to come after him for him to hurt you in most cases.
Yeah, he will throw out a few leg kicks, a few straight punches, just to keep himself ahead on points. But he will give, if you're not like if you're not coming after him with combinations, he will give you the time and the space to set things up. So
Sure.
if Burns can take advantage of that, if he can find a gap to get in and get that takedown, he will have the time to do it. But it's going to be really hard because Magomedov is not the kind of fighter that you can just like dive in on and hit his hips and take him down.
Mm-hmm. Can I tell Dallas a really quick story to comfort him?
Sure.
I once got a tweet from Ruslan Magomedov, and I called him Rashid to his face.
Oh, you dumb shit.
I think I recall that. I was like, oh, big fan, Rashid. It was not Rashid Magomedov.
Well, I'm not totally opposed to just taking a minute to make fun of me for that, because it's like, I remember when I used to do shows with Kid Nate, and I would let him go on a little bit until I was he was talking, and I remember like, dude, you run an MMA set, you're really going to start talking about some dude that's the wrong? So I've sunk to Kid Nate lows.
It's more fun with Nate.
And hey, at least for Connor, for your story, Ruslan is like the nicest fighter in the world. So
yeah, he's a very friendly guy.
Yeah, I'm sure he took it well.
Yeah, and he won't even know about this. Dallas won't even have to apologize like I did.
That's right. Okay, on the odds, Magomedov is the favorite, -180 down to -200. Burns is the underdog, +173 down to +140. Close odds, great prospects. If this were 2 years from now, this would be like a top contender fight, and I would give Burns a serious shot. I think, unfortunately, the Black Zillion style hoofed his style. Like, he really takes time to build guys.
Yeah.
And when they're in the process of being built, they're not complete. They're not ready to just compete against everyone.
And like I said earlier, Magomedov's not really a prospect at this point. Like he's in the refining stage. He's 29. Yep. He's got 19 fights in his record. He's ready to be a contender. Burns is still very much a prospect.
Yeah, Magomedov should be ranked right now. If there were justice in the rankings, and if he'd gotten the right fights, I think he should be a ranked lightweight. Now moving up, Alex Oliveira, Piotr Hallman. Connor, take it away.
I like both these guys. I think Oliveira looked pretty overtrained in his last fight. Did anybody else get that sense? Like, he seemed really flat in his last fight. Yeah. Kind of in the KJ Noons fight. He fought at a pretty crazy pace there. It was like 3 months and 3 fights after that really impressive debut against Gilbert Burns, in which he just about walked away with a decision. I think we'll probably see something closer to the guy that almost beat Burns, rather than the guy who really struggled to get a decision against Joe Merritt.
Yeah.
And he's big. He's got good intangibles like Chaz Skelly, natural kind of fighter. Not a lot of experience, but he has a good sense of distance. He moves well. He's very comfortable in there on the feet and on the ground, despite having kind of clunky ground mechanics. I actually think Piotr Hallman's going to beat him, though. Piotr Hallman is just unstoppable. I think Piotr Hallman is very deceptively strong for his size, so I don't think Oliveira is going to be able to out-muscle him like he has to other guys when his technique isn't quite up to snuff. Piotr Hallman is very well-rounded. He's constantly coming forward. He could take a hell of a shot. Just recall how close he was to starting to turn the tide in his fight with Magomed Mustafayev, who was like a super prospect.
Mm-hmm.
And Mustafayev put a beating on him in the first round. and Hallman was starting to come on, and it really looked like he was going to start winning the fight, and then he got a vicious cut, and it had to be stopped. And I don't think Oliveira is as good as Mustafayev as a prospect. So I think Hallman's a finishing machine too. It doesn't seem like it when you watch his style, but he is an attritive fighter. Everything he lands really wears on you for the rest of the fight, and he has a lot of late finishes. So I think Hallman by decision or possibly a late submission.
Dallas?
Both of these guys are, I guess, more so Hallman, but both of these guys have shown a lot of like erratic behaviors, I guess, in fights. When Hallman came on, I was shocked. Was Yves Edwards his debut?
His debut was he fought one guy before Yves Edwards. It was Francisco Trinaldo.
Yeah, oh, that was it, and he fucking finished him with a
He got wrecked by a liver kick in the first round and came back to submit Trinaldo.
And so, and it's been kind of tough. Like when Oliveira, I have a lot of respect for KJ Noons. I know a lot of people maybe don't, but I think it was because he was billed as a boxer, but he didn't box like a boxer because he fought like an MMA boxer. I mean, some of it was sloppy, but that's how you get, it was like a results oriented, I guess. But he did have some tendencies. But either way, not knowing a ton about Oliveira, seeing him, take care of KJ Noons that quickly definitely earned my respect. But then he just looked kind of blasé in his follow-up after that. Overall, though, Hallman, I thought he was a little younger than he is. I think he's 28 now. But he's got a weird game in that there seems to be no weaknesses. But there are times when he looks unstoppable, and other times when he looks extremely hittable. But throughout all that, there's no question he's durable as hell. He has no quit in him whatsoever, and he has a lot of different like skills and talents he can draw from when he gets, and he can actually has like the mental competency to, I guess fight smart after he's, in terrible positions. I also think he's a risk taker. I might not be right on that one, but he doesn't always just do the safe routine. He's not afraid to dive on something if he sees it, which makes him a hell of an exciting fighter. So I'm going to go with Hallman here. For a while, I thought that he could perhaps, I don't want to know, make waves, but I thought that he would definitely rack up a few wins and be a bit of a fan favorite. I'm just slightly unsold on Oliveira thus far, but so I'm going to lean Hallman.
And Hallman's had a really tough schedule, it has to be pointed out.
Oh, yeah. Well, the fights he won, I thought originally were tougher than the fights that he lost.
But even Ally Quinta, Gleison Tibau, Magomed Mustafayev, those are not bad losses. Those are all very tough fighters, and all of them pretty competitive fights.
Yep. Yeah, this is unfortunate for me. I hope Oliveira comes in a lot better trained than his fight with Merritt. And to be fair, in that fight with Merritt too, Merritt, and he's already been cut by the UFC, which is maybe good or bad for him. But Merritt's kind of one of those like top 5 level athletes with zero training at all. So Oliveira was fighting somebody who's like, every bit as good or better an athlete than him, but just no effective offense, essentially. Which makes for a weird, funky, ugly, tough fight. Like, fighting a guy like that, that's what makes fights ugly. That's what makes fighters look bad. Because it's just like, this guy's faster than me and he's stronger than me, but he can't hurt me. So I'm just having to, like, wail away and thrash at him to try and get anything done. But a problem I've seen with Oliveira, and I hope this is a big thing I'm hoping to see corrected, is that when he can't hurt somebody with his striking gets ugly in a hurry. Like when somebody can compete with him on the feet, all of his technical side just breaks down and he starts winging these predictable punches from the outside, and it's forced him to become more of a grappler in MMA, which is he's not a great grappler. He's not terrible at it, but it's not the kind of skill that he should really be leaning on. It reminds me a bit of Elias Silverio, where he came in as this Muay Thai guy, and he was getting outstruck by better strikers, and so he tried to be a grappler and a wrestler, and he couldn't maintain it. He didn't have the cardio. He tried to drop weight. Nothing worked. So I kind of hope that Oliveira doesn't go the same route. But Hallman's tough. He's a better grappler. He's a fire plug. I do have questions about him after his failed drug test, whether he has eventually the athletic ability to stay in the UFC as just kind of a well-rounded, do everything fighter. If he's gonna win those fights anymore.
Mm.
But this is a great fight to see. He's going to have somebody in front of him that's aggressive, that'll push him everywhere, that'll take the fight to him. It's basically he's fighting, he's basically fighting Magomed Mustafayev without the wrestling and with less natural athleticism. And I got to give Hallman that fight right now, but
Yep.
it's a test. It's something that he has to start proving that he can consistently win those kinds of fights and do it without being juiced, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's tough to say, but that's something he has to prove. Odds on this fight, Oliveira is the favorite, and a reasonably sizable one, surprisingly. Minus 206 up to minus 225, down to minus whatever. You know what I mean. Piotr Hallman is the underdog, plus 170 up to plus 160 up to plus 191. So I think there could be some money to be made perhaps on Piotr Hallman there. Especially I would guess Hallman by decision is plus 375. So
Hallman's
up to
quite
plus.
a finisher, though.
He is. So Hallman by inside the distance is plus 430. Either of those, you can get him inside the distance or by submission at better odds than he is an underdog, which,
But to me, even just the straight underdog odds, I think he's a very surprisingly wide underdog for this matchup.
Yeah. On that note, next fight up, another fight of the night contender, Thomas Almeida, Anthony Birchak. Dallas?
I actually like Anthony Birchak quite a bit. I mean, he's like this indiscernible whirlwind of knees and elbows, and but where I'm going on this is I don't think I can pick him over Almeida. Almeida is one of the boxers, I guess, for MMA boxing that I enjoy watching the most. I don't know what it is. There's something about people who land body shots and it's not a fluke. Like they put people to, not put them to sleep, but they finish fights with body shots. And he does it. It's so instinctive and reactionary. You can just see like years upon years in the gym, shining off all of that shit. So, but I don't know, Birchak to me. So I don't know if you guys agree, but Almeida to me is very very methodical, very technically polished, and Birchak is going to be just kind of a wild man. And I don't discount him whatsoever because of that. I think it's like box the brawler, brawl the boxer kind of thing. So this is one of the fights on the card I'm looking forward to the most. At this point, it's one where I have a very high opinion of Almeida, and I then look, to him as the standard. And I think Birchak has the potential to beat him, but I just don't see it as very likely. I like Almeida in this one.
Connor?
This fight is bananas. Anthony Birchak is exactly the kind of guy to bring out a really fun fight from Thomas Almeida, who is as elite as prospects come. It's shocking to look at how dangerous Almeida's game already is and realize that he is only 24 years old. And he still is in the stage of his career where, unlike Rashid Magomedov, he could still be making drastic improvements and huge changes and be a completely different fighter from one fight to the next or from 1 year to the next. Almeida is a little hittable early in fights. He takes a little bit of time to adjust, and it's because I think he's inside he's a slow starter, but he starts fast. You know what I mean? So it takes him time to adjust and understand how best to fight his opponent, but he is trying to fight them aggressively from the get-go, and so it leaves him in a dangerous spot. Once he adapts, he is a very smart fighter. Really chooses his shots well. His defense comes along as the fight develops, but as we saw in that Brad Pickett fight, he can be tagged in the first few minutes of a fight. And Birchak has power, and he's crazy aggressive and very unorthodox and weird. He likes to throw same side kicks and punches. He'll punch off of his right leg before he even sets his foot back down after throwing a kick. Weird things like that. He's very mean in the clinch. He's not a bad wrestler. He's got a variety of throws and trips from the clinch that he will string together one after the other to get somebody down. And Almeida's takedown defense is not flawless. So Birchak is a very real dog, but I think that as this fight goes on, his chances of doing anything meaningful get less and less. And I've seen Almeida dropped. I have not seen Almeida close to being finished. He recovers very well. He's got youth and conditioning on his side there. So I think we'll see a really crazy back and forth first round, and then probably a second or third round KO by Almeida. But Birchak is also very tough, so it might end up being a 3-round decision. But it's Almeida either way.
Yeah, I think this is a great tester fight for both men. Birchak, like the big thing he has on his side too is that he's really stupid tough. Like Birchak is he's tough and aggressive and a good athlete, and those three things together will get you a long way in MMA. But of course, he's fighting somebody who's tough, aggressive, and a good athlete, and more technical, and that's a tough matchup. I definitely think that Birchak will almost certainly probably hurt Almeida early, and I think this is probably the best test for Almeida to see how much he can adapt and try to work on that, because unlike Pickett and Jabouin and Gorman, like Pickett and Jabouin were both pretty, they're past their prime. They're guys who, if they get stuck in a brawl with somebody, are probably not winning that because they're no longer the most durable guy in the fight. And Gorman is not a technical marvel. He's tough as shit. He's, he's powerful and he's a good athlete, but doesn't have the technical ability to hang with somebody for that long. And I think that, I think Birchak is better than Gorman, and I think that Birchak is probably the stiffest test for Almeida's career right now, honestly. He's the guy that can not only hurt Almeida, but has the toughness and the ability to hang around and to keep hurting him and to keep going after him. But, it's hard not to have keep having faith so far in Almeida's career that he can bounce back. And that he can he can come back from being hurt, that he can improve, that he can fix problems, and that, if Birchak starts to slow down after that first round at all, Almeida's going to just keep getting more aggressive, his output just increases more and more and more. And Birchak, Almeida obviously sacrifices defense for offense in a very serious way. Like, throws a lot, gets hit a lot, but Birchak kind of feels like he's in that middle ground where it's like his defense isn't fantastic and his output isn't fantastic. Like, they're both all right, but it's not so aggressive that it overwhelms. Like, having mediocre defense and decent output is not as good as having awesome output and letting a lot of strikes through. But I think it's safe to lean Almeida. The odds definitely lean Almeida as well. He is the favorite -420 up to -450 or 475 even. Birchak is the underdog +300 up to +365. I do think it should be closer than that. I think Birchak is the stiffest test of Almeida's career and will prove a lot more than beating Pickett or Jabouin. But we'll find out if that's true. It's a great prospect fight for Almeida, and it's the kind of fight Birchak needs after the win over Soto to prove that he can be a top 15 welterweight, or top 15, not welterweight, but bantamweight. That all made sense at some point. All right, light heavyweight co-main event: Glover Teixeira, Patrick Cummins. Connor.
Experience versus inexperience. That's the factor in this fight, I think. Patrick Cummins, not a bad fighter. I think he's really kind of redeemed himself after that. And how could we have expected him to do any better than he did in that fight with Daniel Cormier, his short notice UFC debut? He got blown out by a superbly skilled, talented fighter in a first round. It's whatever. Since then, though, I think he's kind of just shown where his ceiling is. We've seen that he's a very good explosive wrestler. He's got a nice double, nice single, finishes his takedowns well. Pretty good rider from top position. Okay with his ground and pound. To me, he reminds me a lot of Matt Hamill. Like, not a bad fighter, but it's just not, there's nothing there. he's not very well rounded. His striking's not terrible, but it's kind of he's hittable. I don't know. It's just he's kind of missing that next level bump that you want to see from a fighter to really have expectations. And he's 34 years old, which even for a light heavyweight, there's not a lot of room for growth there. Glover Teixeira is 2 years older, but he's got all the experience in the world. He's got lots of power. He's got really good wrestling himself. He's a fantastic grappler. His top game in jiu-jitsu is brutal, as well as his ground and pound. The one question here is whether or not Teixeira can stop Cummins' takedowns. I think he's kind of gotten worse since he started training at his own gym in Connecticut rather than at the pit with John Hackelman and Chuck Liddell. It seems like he spent more time over there at his place. I've seen his Instagram. There's nothing with the fighters at the pit that I've seen. So that kind of worries me. Like his left hook disappeared in his most recent fights. It used to be his best punch, and now he's just right hand happy. And then Phil Davis out-wrestled him with ease, and I don't think that would have happened that same way in an older fight. Still, Patrick Cummins is not Phil Davis, and Glover Teixeira is certainly not Kyle Kingsbury. So I've got to go with Teixeira here.
Dallas?
Well, and the pit would be perfect for this because, I mean, this has got to be like a Chuck Liddell 101 blueprint. Right. I agree. I think Teixeira's wrestling is very underrated, and that's not to say that his submission grappling is actually, to me, kind of underrated as well. Like this dude is sweet on the ground. I haven't seen a ton of him off his back. On top, he's a killer. When you have a guy who can hit as hard as he does and also understands positioning, transitions, and submissions, that is not the kind of guy you want on top of you. I agree. In the analogy to Matt Hamill's good because Cummins is, we knew he could wrestle, but his game lacks potency. I mean, his takedowns, yes, those are potent, but that becomes a highly effective way to put someone on their back, not necessarily to finish the fight. No matter what, I give Teixeira the advantage on the ground everywhere, but with wrestling, and I think that's closer than the gap with Cummins' submission grappling is. So even though Teixeira maybe isn't known off his back, he's spent a lot of times in and out of the gi working off his back. So to me, the only way that Cummins can win this is if he takes him down and kind of does the GSP versus Diaz strategy and like hit a takedown and go all defense and do whatever you can to stay on top. To me, that's his best chance to win, but everyone will hate him, especially in Brazil, for that, to the point where it would be like 10 losses rather than one unspectacular win. So I'd like to share here. Though I got to say, to me, it wouldn't surprise me if Cummins could come out. To me, Teixeira's got to make a statement right away because if Cummins comes out and takes him down once or twice, and once he gets that confidence, then it becomes I got to land a big shot and knock his head off before he takes me down. But I think Teixeira will still get taken down, but I think he'll hold his own enough where his advantages elsewhere, submissions especially, maybe even in the clinch if Cummins gets careless with his head position on takedowns, and the striking game is a wash here. So I like Teixeira.
I would say, to know, I do expect Cummins to get better. Even at 34, I think that really time spent in MMA is so much more important than anything else, and he really only started his career in earnest in 2012. So I do expect him to keep improving for the next 2 or 3 years consistently. And he's fighting out of King's MMA, which means that they should be improving him. Like, they should be working on his flaws. That's not a camp that's not known for just like letting guys stay where they are and not improve. So I do expect to see him get better, but it is a question of how much. The big question, I think the big problem I saw here really was in that Cavalcante fight, which while he won it, every time Cavalcante had any space to strike, he hurt Cummins really badly. Just any moment, any fraction of space, Cummins got rocked or got blasted, and it was just, it was weird because Cummins would control like 3.5 minutes of every round, and the 1.5 minute interspersed throughout was him just getting absolutely rocked off his feet.
Mm-hmm.
Before winning, finally, because Cavalcante doesn't look like he trains anymore. He looks like he just rolls off his couch and fights.
He's the Brazilian Cody McKenzie.
Yeah. But and that's a major problem because Teixeira, I think Teixeira, since he is still out at his own camp, it looks like they've probably righted that ship a little. I would say that's kind of what his OSP fight showed me. His Phil Davis fight, he just looked like he did not, like everything looked like it was wrong.
Yeah.
It looked like he was not training well. It looked like he had aged overnight. He looked shot. And I expected to see that against OSP, and instead he came in and looked a lot more like the fighter he had been previous to that Phil Davis fight. Maybe some of the technical sides of his game are missing. Maybe that's a little worse, but physically he looked more like that fighter. He looked much more like a top 5 light heavyweight, and he's just got too many. He's got too much of the technique and too much strength and ability on his feet for Cummins to do what he did to Cavalcante. Like, Cummins will have had to make a serious jump forward, and that could happen, but it's hard to bet on that. And the other thing I've yet to see Cummins be a serious, like, real top control guy to this point. Every time he takes somebody down, they usually end up getting back to their feet. He's not the kind of guy who just stays on you all round. He's looking to hurt people too much on the ground for that. He's much more offense over control in his wrestling, and that means guys get back to their feet. It's sort of the Johnny Hendricks thing. Like, Hendricks is not actually a great top control wrestler. He's got a great takedown game, but everybody ends up back on their feet. So it's hard to pick against Teixeira. I hope to see Cummins continue to improve, but this may just be a big setback towards that. Odds bear that out. Glover Teixeira is the favorite, minus 450 up to minus 500. Cummins is the underdog, plus 400 down to plus 320. So pretty sizable spread there, which I think is somewhat reasonable. It's light heavyweight. There's still a lot of room for play in there for Cummins to just land something ridiculous and change the whole fight early, but it's a long shot. That brings us to the main event. Victor Gracie, decision Dan, third time's a charm.
Henderson laid on him in what everyone thought was going to be this big explosive barrage of fireworks and pride. His only losses are Anderson Silva, John Jones, and Chris Weidman, which is
Dallas, take it away.
Well, it's kind of weird that so Vitor, since Henderson laid on him in what everyone thought was going to be this big explosive barrage of fireworks and pride, his only losses are Anderson Silva, John Jones, and Chris Weidman, which is pretty fucking impressive. On top of that, I think that Henderson, throughout the evolutions he's gone, really his game, the old age thing seems to affect his game more, because if you're one dimensional and you start to lose maybe a little bit of your chin resistance, maybe a little bit of your punching power, a little bit of your, the spring in your step when you're shooting for doubles or even on a clinch entry, where Vitor's game has always been to kind of lay back and just unload missiles, and Vitor's hand speed is what I'm saying has always been his biggest threat, and I don't think that that's diminished a ton. On top of that, he's added some, kicks that I don't think anyone, saw coming. So to me, and Vitor seems to be, again, I don't know if it's just the way that they fight or not, but Vitor still seems to be pretty agile on his feet, seems to be in really good shape, seems to stay in really good shape, where Henderson's kind of gone through little dips and valleys. That's a new term that I'm going to coin here. I think I'm hungry is where the dips came in. But I'm going to go with Vitor here. I mean, Vitor is very, very hard to knock out, especially considering how many big punchers he's faced in his career. I think his overall agility and his hand speed will definitely be too much for Hendo at this point.
Connor?
It's crazy that I've spent so much time since Vitor Belfort's sort of resurgence explaining how he's no longer this, 3 minutes of action in the first round and then he's done. The Vitor Blitz is a myth. And then we see him post TRT against Chris Weidman, and it was like a classic Vitor Belfort fight. It was like the earliest version of Vitor Belfort all over again. So it kind of makes you question how much of his ability to throw power and to be patient, like how much of that was due to his training with the TRT or with steroids, how much of it was him maturing as a fighter. I have to believe that he still has some of those skills he developed. Like he still has the improved kicking game, I'm sure. He still has the better combination punching. He still has the better footwork. Um, so while he has gotten worse, I think the Chris Weidman fight really kind of demonstrated that. Dan Henderson's gotten really demonstrably worse in a way that you really can't argue with. Like Dan Henderson has been hurt in every fight, every single fight, except for the Tim Boetsch one where he knocked Boetsch out in under 30 seconds. And as fun as that was to see, and as uplifting as it was to see, like we did kind of know that it was a long shot,
Yeah.
and it happened, but we knew like Dan Henderson can still hit really hard. He still has an element of craft when he knocked out Shogun in their last fight. There was some craftiness there, some nice timing on the inside. He kind of ripped him off balance and then hit him with a big punch. That's cool. But unless you make a big giant mistake and you allow Henderson to be in the fight for that long, then I don't really. Again, it's a long shot, and I think that between two fighters who are past it, I just have to go with the one who has had better recent performances, and that's Vitor Belfort.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we've seen, like going into that Boach fight, I remember, we were talking about Boach should win it. It's his fight to win. It's a great fight for him, to take out Dan Henderson. And then, like, right before they got into the cage, it's like, he has to walk right into the pocket to beat him. Like, that is Tim Boach's strategy to beat Dan Henderson, is to walk straight into the pocket and land the big shot first. And it was sort of like this moment of like, oh God, this is not going to
I
work.
was so confident. Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah, like it just, and that's not Vitor Belfort's lone strategy. He does not have to walk into the pocket to beat Dan Henderson. He can pick at him from the outside. He's got a good kicking game. He has the speed to get in and out of range before Dan Henderson can hit him, or he's shown it in the past. And even, what we've seen, like I would even say in that Weidman fight, yeah, he lost. Yeah, it was like the classic Vitor Blitz out of 1999. But he didn't look athletically unfit to compete with Weidman. Like, it looked like, he basically just didn't fight. He fought desperate. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that desperation was born of, consideration for gas tank, or a feeling of like, if I can just blitz this guy out quick, it'll happen. But he looked quick enough to try. Like, he surprised Weidman out of the gate, and Weidman's just tough enough to take it, adjust, and jump on it. Dan Henderson cannot do that. Like, if Belfort blitzes him that quickly, it might give Dan Henderson a brief window of opportunity, but I do not think that Dan Henderson, like, Belfort has not shown he's not shown that he's just going to lumber forward in the way that Tim Boetsch did.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Henderson has to have these days. I mean, even Hua eventually, like, that was what he ended up doing, was just kind of like, well, I'll just walk into the pocket and, like, outstrike you. And that was, everyone who hasn't done that has beat Henderson at this point, and I don't think that Belfort is going to do that.
I think the only thing sadder than seeing Dan Henderson knocked out in this fight in the first round will be if this fight somehow goes 5 rounds. That'll be this fight going 5 rounds in 2015 will be the worst thing possible.
If it ends up Tito Bonner style.
Yeah, exactly, right. Exactly.
All right, odds on this. Dan Henderson is the underdog, plus 309 down to plus 250. Vitor Belfort is the favorite, minus 346 up to minus 375. That seems pretty reasonable to me. I don't think there's anything wrong with those odds. Any last minute picks that you guys have on who you think is worth something?
I think we're at Rashid Magomedov. He was at minus 160 a couple days ago. I think he's not a bad betting pick there. I think Piotr Hallman is a very strong pick for an underdog. He's got really wide odds that he really doesn't deserve. And maybe Mateus Nicolaou and anybody else?
I could see maybe throwing a little change at Birchak by KO.
Or
You
really,
can get that.
Cummins. Wasn't Cummins really like plus 300?
Yeah, he's plus
And I don't
355.
think he's going to win, but I think when you have at least a wrestler with that kind of takedown ability, that's worth a mention at least.
I think Jan Cabral might be better, like really long shot underdog pick, especially if
Yeah.
it's Cabral by submission. Case,
What
I
were the odds
believe
on that
Case
fight?
has been submitted, and Cabral by submission is
You can get Cabral by submission at plus 400.
Ooh.
or inside
Cabral by
distance.
submission and Birchak by TKO is plus 800,
Mm.
which just $5.
Now I think those are long shots. That's the trouble with this card
Yeah.
because it's so well matched. Most of the fights, the odds really reflect the value of the fight.
Yeah.
And that's why I like that idea of instead of putting, a strategic decision on, just throw a couple bucks at some weird ass things because I imagine this is going to be that kind of card.
We will see a couple of underdogs get really cool wins, I think, off this card. It should be every fight on this outside of Umalatov Andrade, and even then Andrade is kind of a wild card as a striker. Every fight should be fun. There's no fight on this card where I'm not gonna enjoy watching this.
And they're all meaningful. I think all of them have a narrative that gives them some kind of value in their divisions or for these fighters with the burgeoning careers. I really love this card overall.
All right. On that note, I think it's time to close the show. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find Dallas on Twitter at Uncle Justice. Subscribe to MMANation.com to get more analysis and interviews and all of our other great shows, including Knuckle Up, Vivisection, Sixth Round, Care Don't Care, Prospectus, all that good stuff. Heavy Hands, I believe, is on there still.
Yeah.
And find us all on bloodyelbow.com. Enjoy the fights. We'll talk to you all next week.